Questions, questions orales. The honourable member for Halifax.
De camoufler le scandale du Sénat sont devenus la norme au bureau du Premier ministre. Dilution d'un rapport interne du Sénat, un chèque de 90 000 $ au sénateur Duffy et le rapport du vérificateur général sur le scandale du Sénat est encore plus désolant. Est-ce que le bureau du Premier ministre a eu des contacts avec les sénateurs avant le dépôt du rapport?
Obviously, Mr. Speaker, it was the Senate that actually invited the Auditor General in to examine their expenses, Mr. Speaker. And we understand, of course, that that report has been tabled and been made public, and we expect the Senate to implement the recommendations.
Member for Halifax.
Mr. Speaker, that member and that government refuses to come clean with Canadians about whether or not the Prime Minister's office was in touch with any senators before this report was tabled. Why are Conservatives so afraid to tell the truth? Could it be because 8 of the senators who are named in the report were appointed by that Prime Minister? Or could it be because the Prime Minister's hand-picked Senate Speaker was also named in the report? Or maybe it could be because Senate leaders named in the audit set up their very own appeals process. Whoa. Conservatives have a history of cover-ups. Are they now working with Conservative senators to do damage control?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, again, as I just said, it was the Senate that actually invited in the Auditor General to examine their expenses, and I understand that the Auditor General has put in place a number of recommendations, and we hope that the Senate will follow those recommendations. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, what's highlighted is that when people deliberately abuse taxpayer resources, Canadians have a right to expect that money to be repaid, and if individuals have done it deliberately, that they face the full extent of the law, Mr. Speaker. I certainly hope the NDP will reflect on that, Mr. Speaker. I know they owe $2.7 million. I hope they will reflect on that and will consider repaying the taxpayers the $2.7 million that they owe them.
The honourable member for Halifax.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians deserve better than a scandal-plagued, self-policing Senate, and that Auditor General is calling for transformative change and independent Senate oversight. So after coming here to reform the Senate, now Conservatives, they're defending the status quo and Senate corruption. Do they agree with the Senate Speaker that, quote, these senators should be thanked by the population for their actions? Or do they agree with us and the Auditor General that transformative change is needed now?
Mr. Speaker, we learned last night that it is a priority of the NDP to actually hold a constitutional conference, to open up the Constitution, and to hold a referendum, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the next steps on the Senate. That's not something that we're going to do, Mr. Speaker. We're going to continue to focus on jobs and economic growth, Mr. Speaker, because that's a priority of Canadians. At the same time, what is very clear is that the NDP, they owe $2.7 million. There's only one taxpayer, and whether it's a senator or whether it's a member of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, there are 68 members of the NDP caucus who owe $2.7 million. I believe that's 3 times as much as the Auditor General identified in the Senate report, and I hope they'll pay it back.